Chapter 1. Meeting Under the Neon Lights. The workday at a large Manhattan marketing firm was almost over. Many employees had already packed their things, preparing to leave, but for Tess Daniels, the moment of respite had not yet arrived. She was sitting at her desk, absorbed in yet another report, when Jacob knocked on her office door. "Tess, are you still here?" His voice was calm but with a slight hint of surprise. He was a senior manager with whom Tess had been working for the past few months, and although their collaboration was strictly professional, there had long been a sense of something more between them. Tess looked up, meeting his dark eyes. He always looked as if he could decipher her thoughts, and it made her strangely uneasy. Their relationship had never gone beyond a strict work ethic, but sometimes she felt like he knew more about her feelings than she did. "Yes, Jacob, I'm not done yet. How are you?" She tried to keep her voice neutral, but his presence always made her nervous. Her gaze slid over his figure. The perfect fit of his suit, the slight casualness in his posture, created something attractive and unattainable about him. He came closer, leaning against her desk. "It's okay. You and I don't often cross paths after work," he said, with a slight, barely noticeable challenge in his voice. Jacob was not only her colleague, but also a person whose confidence and determination attracted her attention. Tess felt how his words somehow touched her. She only nodded, hoping that her face did not betray what was going on in her chest. Her heart was beating faster, and her breathing became a little heavy. "You know that we have strict working hours." Tess noticed that her voice had become a little shaky. He smiled. His smile was warm, but there was something mysterious about it, and it made her wonder what was hidden behind his appearance. "I know, Tess, but isn't it fun to break the rules a little sometimes?" His words carried a hint that Tess couldn't help but notice. She felt something inside her begin to tremble, as if her entire world had suddenly shifted off its usual axis. This conversation was not casual. He knew that she felt an attraction to him, and although they both tried to avoid it, the attraction was obvious. They were both adults, and even if the feelings were inappropriate in an office environment, it still couldn't be ignored. "You're scaring me, Jacob," she said quietly, feeling her face flush with excitement. He took another step closer, his gaze so close she could feel his breath on her face. "It's not my goal to scare you, Tess." His voice was warm, but there was a hint of something deeper in it. "I just want you to know that sometimes rules are meant to be broken." Tess felt her heart skip a beat. She was struggling to keep her emotions within reasonable limits. But was that even reasonable? "We both know this won't work, Jacob." She tried to control her breathing, but her voice still betrayed her doubts. He smiled again, and this time there was something playful, almost mischievous, in his eyes. "Nobody said it would work, Tess, but maybe it's worth at least trying. Sometimes the most dangerous things are the sweetest." Tess closed her eyes for a second, trying to focus, but his words had already seeped into her mind. She couldn't ignore their meaning entirely, couldn't forget the magnetism that existed between them, and honestly, it was both terrifying and incredibly attractive at the same time. Chapter 2. Labyrinth of Feelings. Since that evening in the office, Tess couldn't stop thinking about Jacob. Every time she closed her eyes, his dark eyes and enigmatic smile appeared before her mind's eye. She tried to maintain her professional distance, but every look, every word he said made her heart beat faster. Work consumed her, but thoughts about him became like an invisible shadow that followed her everywhere. A few days later, Tess ran into him in the hallway. He was standing by the window, looking thoughtfully at the city. As she came closer, he turned and their eyes met. He was wearing his usual formal suit, but his face was relaxed, as if he was ready for something more than just an ordinary day at work. "Tess?" His voice was soft, almost casual, but there was something in it that made her heart skip a beat. "Hello, Jacob." She tried to speak calmly, but her voice sounded a little hoarse, as if her emotions were getting the better of her. "What are you doing here?" He took a step toward her, then leaned forward slightly, as if he wanted to say something but stopped at the last moment. Tess felt the tension between them growing with each passing second. "I was thinking about something personal," he replied, his eyes remaining glued to her face. "Have you ever considered how hard it is to be around someone who can destroy all your principles, but you can't tear yourself away?" Tess froze, feeling her skin grow slightly hot at his words. It was a hint. He knew how she felt, and he didn't seem to be trying to hide the fact that his thoughts were increasingly occupied with her too. "You know what I'm talking about, don't you?" he continued, not looking away. There was a slight mockery in his voice, but she felt an underlying threat in it, a threat to her normal state. He was too close, too captivatingly present. Tess took a step back, trying to regain control. "Jacob, we need to think about the consequences. We both know this could be dangerous, not just for us, but for the whole company." He chuckled, but there was a fire in his eyes that made her heart beat faster again. "Oh, I don't think it's dangerous. But what if we give in, even for a moment? Isn't it worth knowing what it feels like?" His words penetrated her mind like heat, burning her. Tess felt her face burning again. All her rational arguments were fading into the background, giving way to a desire she could no longer ignore. "I can't, Jacob," she whispered, though her body was telling a different story. He noticed it, and his gaze grew even more insistent. "Why?" His voice was low, almost seductive. "You know you really want this." Tess fought with herself. Every word he said brought them closer to the dangerous line of no return. She knew that if she stepped there, she would never be able to return to her previous state. "I can't risk everything." Her words sounded like an excuse, but she felt them losing their power. Everything inside her screamed that she wanted it, wanted him. Jacob came even closer, and their bodies were inches apart. He wasn't touching her, but his presence was so strong that Tess felt her mind losing its bearings. "And if you don't take risks, you'll never know what could have been. It's that simple, Tess. Just take a step." He said it with such calm that she felt her heart begin to give in. She tried to back away, but he spoke again, now with a hint of confidence, almost command. "You can't control everything, Tess, but you can make a choice. Now, right here." Her breathing became more ragged. She couldn't break out of this vicious circle. Everything inside her screamed, "Give up." But at the same time, there was this invisible call that pushed her to step into the unknown. "I don't know." Her voice trembled. Jacob leaned a little closer, and her world turned upside down. He was so close that she could feel his warmth. He whispered, "You know you can't just leave. You're already here." And it was true. She was already here, in this dangerous but inexpressibly attractive moment. Chapter 3. The Trap of Desire. Tess stood there, unable to take her eyes off Jacob. His presence seemed to envelop her, making everything around her fade and disappear. She knew that if she took this step, there would be no going back. Everything would change. Everything. "You just want me to do this," she said, almost surprised to hear her voice trembling with both anxiety and desire. "You want to see me in your arms." Jacob chuckled again, his face close, his eyes sparkling with quiet victory. "No, Tess, I want you to know that you want this for yourself." His voice was even softer, almost a whisper, as if their conversation was a secret, hidden from everyone else. "I'm not forcing you. I'm just showing you that you can choose." Tess took a step back, but her gaze never left him. A storm of emotions raged in her chest, and everything inside her was drawn to him, despite her rational concerns. You know this would be wrong." Her words sounded weak, as if she was trying to prove to herself that she was still in control of the situation. He stepped closer, and their bodies almost touched. His scent, subtle but alluring, penetrated her consciousness, confusing her. "I know it's not easy, Tess, but if you only knew how difficult it can be to be with someone who can't forget you." His words sounded with a hint of sincerity, and there was something in them that made her doubt herself. "And what if we both crossed that line a long time ago without realizing it?" Tess wanted to answer, but her thoughts were too confused. She felt her hand involuntarily touch his. Instantly, her body responded to this contact. She could hardly believe that she had taken this step herself, but she felt her fingers tighten slightly around his wrist. "You don't understand, Jacob." Her voice was barely audible, but the words came from the heart. "I can't. I don't want to lose control. It's too dangerous." His answer was silent. He only raised her hand and gently, almost tenderly, ran his finger along her wrist, making her tremble from the light touch. At that moment, their eyes met, and Tess felt her inner world crumble. Too much attraction, too much desire. She couldn't resist any longer. "Don't try to convince yourself." His voice was now a tone of confidence that finally broke her last doubts. "We're here, Tess, and you know that you can't walk away from this anymore." At that moment, her mind stopped fighting her desires. She wanted him, and it didn't matter what consequences it would bring. Everything else seemed insignificant now. Jacob moved closer, his lips finding her neck. Tess cried out in surprise, her body responding to his touch immediately. He paused, not wanting to rush things, but his breathing was becoming more and more ragged jagged. "You want this," he said quietly, continuing to touch her neck, making her tense with each caress. Tess squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hide the storm of feelings, but all she could do was touch him. She ran her hand down his back, feeling his body tense under her fingers. It was so simple and yet so difficult a decision. Refuse or give in? I don't know. Her voice almost broke, but it was too late to stop. Her body spoke for her. Jacob leaned down to her face, and his lips finally touched hers. A light but passionate touch that made her heart beat faster. At first timidly, then more confidently, he took her face in his hands, and his kiss became deeper, more passionate. Tess could not restrain herself any longer. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she pulled him to her as if she wanted to absorb everything that was between them. He pulled away only for a moment, their breathing heavy but excited. He looked at her with such an expression in his eyes that Tess felt her world crumbling and being built anew again. "You were right," he said quietly, but with determination. "We've both been trapped for a long time, and now we can't get out." Tess didn't answer. She simply took his hand and led him out of the hallway toward her office. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. They had both made their choice, and now there was no turning back. Chapter 4: Confessions. Tess and Jacob found themselves in her office. The door slammed behind them, and the sudden silence became even more intense. Inside, Tess was struggling with herself, but her body and feelings had long ago made their choice. It was as she had feared. She could no longer escape what was between them. Jacob stood by her desk, their eyes never leaving each other. He was in no hurry, not trying to take her hand, not forcing anything. He was simply there, as if waiting for her to make the next move. Tess took a breath, her voice low with a barely noticeable tremor as she spoke. "You knew I couldn't resist, didn't you?" Jacob smiled. It wasn't mockery, but an admission that everything that was happening between them was inevitable. All this time, from that first glance, he knew that they would end up here sooner or later. "Yes, I knew," he said quietly, taking a step toward her. "But I didn't have to rush you. You came to me on your own, step by step." Her heart was pounding faster. Tess looked into his eyes and felt all her resolve disappear. He was right. It was inevitable, and she couldn't fight what was between them any longer. "You're right," she whispered. "I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore." Tess stepped closer, her lips parting slightly, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. Jacob didn't pull away. Instead, he kissed her back with such passion that the whole world disappeared in that moment. He pulled her to him, his arms gently encircling her waist, and she felt all her resolve dissolve in his embrace. Their kisses grew deeper, but there was no hurry now. There was no more tension or hesitation, just a pure desire to be close. Jacob took her hand gently, and without taking his lips from hers, he led her to her chair. Tess sat on him, her eyes full of genuine admiration and a feeling that had not been so obvious in a long time. In his arms, she felt that she could be herself, that her heart could stop being afraid. "I didn't think I'd ever be here," she said when their kiss finally ended. She searched his eyes, waiting for an answer. "Neither did I," he answered, his voice full of calm confidence, but his eyes were sincere. "But now that we're here, I want you to know that I don't care about the consequences. I want to be with you." Tess felt her heart unravel at those words. She had always been afraid to step into the unknown, afraid to ruin her life, her career, her independence. But now she realized her life was just beginning, and no matter how many difficulties they might encounter ahead, she was ready to walk next to him. "I want to be with you too, Jacob," she whispered, her eyes shining with emotion. Their hands found each other. At that moment, there was no more doubt, no fear. There was only love between them, which was just beginning to grow and blossom. They could not know what awaited them in the future, but now, here and now, their hearts beat in unison, and that was all they needed. Epilogue: A new path. A few months had passed since the day Tess and Jacob confessed their feelings to each other. Their relationship had moved to a new level. They were not afraid to talk about their feelings and supported each other in everything, both in their personal lives and in their careers. They found harmony in being together despite all the difficulties that could come their way. The office was no longer a place where everything was kept at a professional distance. Now it was a place where their feelings were not hidden and where they were not afraid to be themselves. They told each other more than once that their romance was something forbidden and impossible, but it was this unpredictability that made it so special. After all, when you decide to be with the one you love, everything becomes possible. And although their path was not always easy, Tess and Jacob knew that despite all the difficulties, they found each other, and that was the most important thing.